John, the Auckland Housing
Well,
situation.
it's New Zealand housing, full on, and we can see an awful lot throwing through the media right now. The structural issue is that New Zealand house prices are actually going through the roof in the long run. You can see from the graphic that New Zealand is probably the worst in the world in terms of the OECD numbers that were recently published in the Herald. And you can see that the black line at the top there is New Zealand, and you can see how things have moved. If you think back to 1990, we didn't have much of a conversation around unaffordable house prices. House prices were house prices, and we didn't like paying the money, but we just got on with it. But right now, this entry into the market for first-time buyers is extremely difficult.
The green line, which is Australia.
Australia is in much the same sort of boat, but New Zealand's like the best of the worst of the two. You know, never feel useless. You can always be a bad example. But I mean, New Zealand it's basically showing that we have a significant distortion around housing, and addressing that politically is tough. The discussions that we're seeing all the time shows just how difficult it is. But the problem with house prices is what it does in terms of feeding back into the rest of the economy.
Is this partly because of we became an interest-based economy?
Well, we've become a financialized economy, like most of the English-speaking world. We've played with assets, and we'll talk about dairy payouts in a moment. But even land has got into that same treadmill where we pay more for land, so we have to earn more off the land. And if we pay too much and things go backwards, we come under a lot of pressure.
Looking at the graph again, I mean, the blue line, which is the United States, 2001, we were all about the same.
Yep, and it's this issue of the favoured treatment of housing and assets in terms of the financial system. If I've got a business that's turning over $4 million with no assets, if I've got a business turning over $1 million with $4 or $5 million worth of assets, I can borrow on the second, but I can't borrow on the first.
What should we be not buying houses? I remember when Winston Peters said you can't heat a house if you buy one.
Well, we should be buying houses, but we should be thinking of what is it that's driving the same house being double the price in 4 or 5 years. Why is it that happens? And that's really the ability of the financial system to pump debt into that part of the economy.
Is there an answer?
There is an answer. The answer sits of moving a lot of the policy framework that rebalances the economy. So I know it's unpopular, capital gains tax.
Yeah,
I know it's
been pushing that one
unpopular,
for a while.
Prudential ratios, which say, I mean, back in the day when I were a boy, when I bought my first house, the amount of money I could borrow was strictly limited to my income. We've allowed all that to slip away now. We've allowed the ability to buy an asset as a function of how much the banks are willing to lend against it. And that's probably not good from the point of view of financial stability.
I need to congratulate you because you said however many months ago, was it 6 months ago, that they'd be cutting the interest rates, and you were bang on.
By the skin of my teeth. I said
But
by June we would have to cut the OCR. I saw the economy as weaker. The bank has cut the OCR now. There will be another cut in my view, because we've seen the fall off in the dairy payout. We've seen general weakness across the global economy, and the currency was unsustainably high, as the bank kept saying, but now frankly they've done something about it.
So that will come back, so we're likely to be becoming less attractive for people from overseas pouring thousands and millions of dollars in?
Well, that's the problem with the housing market. If the housing market is sucking in investment from offshore, if the housing market is inflating very quickly, we can't easily cut the OCR, because if we do, we fuel the housing market. If we don't cut the OCR, we have a problem with exchange rates. So we've got a dilemma that we sit in the middle of. That requires the bank to move in the macroprudential areas, which are like the LVRs or income to loan ratios or some other controls in terms of how much or how often the banks can lend against those assets. That is a real requirement in terms of delivering financial stability, because if we did have a housing market setback, shock, crash, whichever word you use, it would be very damaging for the broader economy.
Is it likely?
probably not likely. There's too many people focused on stopping it from happening, but that doesn't mean that we don't have that ongoing impact. Remember, the dollar's trading under 70 cents now. First, I think, a five-year low, which is really helping our exporters, and to some extent will help the dairy payout, because the returns from export dairy produce will be better because the exchange rate is somewhat lower.
They're talking about $7 billion lost to the economy because of the dairy price. I mean, that's huge.
It's a major impact in New Zealand, but we need to deal with the deeper seated structural reasons for that, and that sits around the financial policy.
And 45% of the farmers are predicted to not make ends meet.
That's the problem with the readiness of farmers to pay too much for dairy land. It's a business model which says we'll actually run on the smell of an oily rag, we will just about service the debt, and we'll make the real money. No, we will make the real money when we sell the farm in 20 years' time. That's the problem of an asset-based business model.
Is that likely to mean that the prices are likely to come down?
I think if the payout continues to fall or stay low, then surely the price of the asset should change to accommodate that.
Because the banks will drive that, won't they? They won't say yes to mortgages.
That's essentially, there'll be less investment funded by debt going into that sector.
Because that's frightening. What's happening in Europe?
Well, Europe, the big story is Greece and the ongoing shuffling to the exit of the Greece economy from the euro. Latest news today is that the talks have broken down and each side is blaming the other, standard practice. And we'll see. I actually believe they'll find a solution. I think not finding a solution is probably territory nobody wants to get into. But right now, neither side is talking to the other and blaming the other side. Yeah. This is the standard public negotiation process.
And then, of course, there's the Trans-Pacific
Partnership.
That's
and
right.
so Obama was looking for a continuation of the fast track. The Democratic Party said, no, we don't think there's enough protection for our American workers. And Obama is struggling to see that through now, and it really is apparently the case that the TPP is under terminal discussions right now.
So, yeah, right. So what's that? Is that likely to hit us, or is it just a lost opportunity?
Well, the argument is that gains to trade. So if we free up trade, we see more exports out of New Zealand, we see freer trade, we see lower cost trade, and that adds to the economic activity in the trade bloc. There is a claim that there's a significant gain for New Zealand, but on the other side there's that worry of Farmac and what might be done to reduce the effectiveness of Farmac, and what might happen around copyright and intellectual property.
So to be oversimplification, it's a case of I bought a lottery ticket but I didn't win it.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I would hope that we see something out of the TPP, but there is that problem of New Zealand would like to see free trade in agriculture, Japan wouldn't like that, if you like, and the US wouldn't like that. The US would like full control of intellectual property, including pharma, and Farmac wouldn't like that. So there's this standard tension that goes on inside all negotiations.
As always, it's terribly, terribly complicated, but thank you for unravelling it.